Hey guys, it's Mr. G, and in this video I'm going to go over Unit 3, Lab 2, Page 1, remembering the moves in the tic-tac-toe game. So this lab is a continuation of Unit 2, Lab 4, Page 4, which I've already made a video on, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go back and do so before you move on to this page. I've already broken down what this lab wants you to do in 4 simple steps. First, we're going to set a global variable called board, and we're going to set it equal to a list that has 9 items inside of it, and all of them are named empty. Then we're going to create a sprite local variable called square number on the original square sprite, and we're going to try to set the correct value of square number for each clone to be 1 through 9. Once the square or the clone is clicked, I should say the clone because the original square is invisible, or it's hidden really. But once the clone is clicked, we're going to make sure that we replace the square's item number in the board list with X or O. So I'm going to basically come back to this page every so often, and I'm going to work on the first one right now. I'm going to set the global variable, which is called board, to a list with 9 items named empty. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a variable and make sure it's global. So I want to make sure that it's for all sprites, and I'm going to call it board. I want to make a little change to make board. I want to show and I want to hide the original sprite inside of make board instead of outside of it. Because when I make the board, I really should have the original sprite take care of everything and disappear inside of here. So if I want to remake or reuse make board, I should have all the stuff it needs inside of here. So I'm going to hit apply, and now my code is a little bit simpler when I start the game. Once I set x's turn equal to true, I want to set my board variable equal to a list that has 9 items in it, and all of them are named empty. There we go. So that is 9 empties, and if I click on the green flag, it creates my board variable with 9 empty slots inside of it. Okay, got number 1 down. Number 2 says create a sprite local variable square number on the original square sprite. So keep in mind that all of this code is on the original square. You can see that this is in the script area of the only square that exists on the board, or that I can put code in before I make clones. So what I want to do is I want to create the sprite local variable. Let me make a variable. And I'm going to name it square number. Okay? And I'm going to make sure that it's for this sprite only. I don't want it to be used anywhere else. I want every single sprite or every single clone to get their own version of square number. And you're going to see why that's important in just a few minutes. So I hit OK, and there we go. We have our square number. And it is not initialized yet. So I want to initialize it at the start of the game. So if I set the square number to 0, let's say, actually we got to think about this because we want to go from 1 to 9, but if I set it after I make the board, then it doesn't even matter. Like all of my squares will have the same square number, depending on what was last ran or what the last square number was. So what I have to do is I really should set the variable before I make the board. I could even put that in make board, but I want to put it just before make board right now so that I realize that when I am going to draw a board, I can change the value of square number inside of make board. So it probably makes sense to put it inside of make board. So I'm going to set square number equal to 0, and what I'm going to do is just before I create a clone, I'm going to increase the value of square number. So let's go over this one more time. I've created the sprite local variable called square number on the original square sprite, and I want to make sure that I find a way to set the correct value of square number on each clone. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to set square number equal to 0 right at the very beginning. And right before it creates a clone, I'm going to increase the value of square number by 1. So on the first run, it's going to increase the square number from 0 to 1. And then on the next run, it's going to increase it to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 until we get to 9, and that's when the last square gets placed. So that should work. That numbering system should work. So what I'm doing inside of MakeBoard is I'm setting the square number to 0 to start. I'm initializing it at 0 when the green flag is clicked and when MakeBoard is being run. And what I can then do is change the value just before I create a clone. Change the value of square number by 1. So what this is going to do, it's going to set square number to 0, and just before it creates clones, it's going to increase the value of square number by 1. And this is going to happen 9 times because I have it inside of the for loop, which is inside of the other for loop, or for blocks in Snap. I'm going to hit apply, hit OK, and when I hit the green flag, this square number variable should say 9. So it should be increasing 1 by 1. And it does. It says 9, which is perfect. Now, if I want to debug it, what I could do is, just to make sure that it's doing it correctly, right before it creates the clone, I'm going to say the square number. So let me actually say what the square number is. Let me put that in a sentence. So this is a cool way to debug this. I could use the join block. So just before I create the clone, I'm going to say the square number is, and I'm going to display the square number for 2 seconds. Actually, I'm going to make that 1 second because otherwise it's going to take a while. So what this is doing is it's creating my square number, setting it equal to 0 at the very beginning, and it's going to change the square number by 1. Now, the whole reason for doing this and doing this before I create the clone is because the clone is going to be created based on whatever the original sprite is in, whatever state it's in. So if the original sprite has a square number that's equal to 5 million, then when I create a clone, it's going to have a square number of 5 million. If I create another one that has a square number of 5,000,001, then it's going to create a clone that has a 5,000,001 square number value. So I'm going to make sure that I want to change the square number just before I create the clone. That way each clone is basically brand new. It has its own square number and we don't have any repeats. So I think this code should basically be good for debugging to make sure that every single square is about to get the right number. So let me hit apply. Let me run it by clicking the green flag, and it's not working. So why is that? Oh, because it's not connected. There we go. I just connected it, and now it should run. The square number is 1, the square number is 2, 3, and you can't see it. 4, 5, 6 is behind, 7, 8, and 9. So some of these were a little tough to see because they came up behind the grid, but there's really nothing we can do about that, I don't think. If there is, let me know in the comments below. Okay, so far we've accomplished 1, 2, and 3. We set the correct value of square number on each clone. So what I could also do, let me just bring this down, but what I could also do to make sure that it's got the correct number, let me get rid of that debugging code, that say code. Let me get rid of that, put the create clone right back where it was, hit apply, there we go. Now what I could also do is when I click on a block, I could have it say its square number. So let me do that. So I'm going to add this code just before it checks anything. When I click on a block, it should say the square number for 1 second. So when I click up here, it should say 1. There we go. When I click over here, it should say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. When I click here, it should say 5. And when I click down here in the bottom right, it should be 9. Bottom left, it should be 7, 8 in the middle of the bottom. And it looks like our code is working. The top is 2, top middle is 2, and the top right should be 3. Great. Our code is working exactly how we want. Each clone now has its own square number that's a different value from 1 to 9. Okay, so let me just get rid of some of that code that I used to kind of like debug my program. And we're ready for the last step. What we want to do is when a square clone is clicked, we want to replace the square's item number in the board list with X or O. So what that means is when I click on a block or a sprite, I want to change the value inside of this board list Okay, I want to change the value to become either X or O, depending on whose turn it is. So what I could do is inside of my when I'm clicked block, that's where I'm going to capture that a block was clicked or a sprite was clicked, and that's where I can put in some code to change the value of one of these items to either X or O. And I could use my square number variable in each sprite to basically identify which place I should change. So let's think about this. So where should I do this? So I know I'm going to do it in when I'm clicked, because that's when it should change the board and it should change the actual, like the costume as well. So let me hide the square number value because we don't really need to use that right now. I just debugged it for a little bit, a couple times. So let me see. If it's X's turn, let's think about this. Let's think out loud. If it's X's turn, when I click on a block, I want to change the value or the value of the square number or the item of the square number. Let me actually try using code here so I could do this correctly. So I'm going to change the item, not item 1, but the item square value or square number, I should say. So what this does is it changes the correct place. And let's see. So item square number of, and it's going to be board because it's of the board list. And I'm going to change it to either X or O. So how can we do that? Maybe we could use a replace block. Replace makes sense. So I could replace item blank of blank with blank. That actually looks like really good code. We could use this. Instead of using this reporter, I could use the replace block, and I'm going to replace the item square number of the board, and I'm going to replace it with X. So when it's X's turn, it's going to replace that item with with X in the board list. So let me bring this over here. Let me think about when I should put it. If I put it after, does that make sense? I should really do it like right when I click it. So maybe right when it switches the costume, I'm going to change the value. And when it's X's turn, it should change the value of square number inside of the board list to X from empty. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to click the top left one, and it should basically put an X right here where it says 1. Perfect. We were able to detect the correct place. And actually, let's see. If I do the next one, which is O, if I put O in the second slot or the second square number, it didn't do anything. And that's because I didn't put any code down here to capture that and to change the value. So I'm actually going to duplicate this because it's actually not duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate just that line because it's going to be very similar. And I'm going to put it right after I switch the costume, but before I change X's turn back. So instead of replacing it with an X, I'm going to replace it with an O when it is clicked. Let me just clean this up. There we go. Let me just start this game over. Hit the green flag, and let's see if this works. When I hit the top left, it should say X, and it changes the value of the first one to X. When I hit the second one, it should change the second item to O. And it did. Perfect. I'm going to do the bottom left, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it should be the 7th item in board, and it should be an X. Perfect. It works. And I'm going to do the bottom right for O. So that should be 9. And perfect. It changed it. So if I keep going, that's X. So 4 should be O. 5 should be X. 6 should be O. And 8 should be X. Perfect. So I was able to detect what the square number was and use that value inside of the item of board to change its current value. So that is one way to do it. There could be other ways. There are other ways actually, but this is the way that I kind of think it's logical. And you guys saw, like right in the beginning, I started using the item of, okay, which is completely valid. I would just have to use different codes or maybe write my own block to make sure that it accomplishes the same thing as replace item. I just think replace item is great because it's already there. It makes logical sense in English, so why not use it? Okay, so that is how you complete Unit 3, Lab 2, Page 1, remembering the moves. And check back later for Page 2.